Professor Carson, welcome back to KL, and thank you so much for coming tonight.
It's my privilege to be here.
To help us get to know you a little, can you tell us a bit more about yourself, and particularly about your family?
I have one favorite wife, one favorite daughter, and one favorite son, acquired in that order. My wife is English by background. I'm Canadian by birth. We're now missionaries to the Americans. I have a daughter who is unmarried, living on the west coast of the United States. My son is unmarried, living on the east coast of the United States. So naturally, we live in the middle.
Thank you.
Yes. Enough, he says, enough.
Now, over the next 3 nights, you're going to be telling us about the true God, the God who is there. How did you come to know this God yourself?
In my case, I was reared in a Christian home. So my earliest memories are hearing Bible stories and family prayer times. And so there was never a time in our home where we didn't hear about Christ and the God of the Bible. And as is pretty common, I think, with people with my sort of background. I'm not sure when I really trusted Christ personally. It may have been when I was 8, almost 9, when I was hearing the gospel at a Christian camp called Muskoka Baptist Conference in Ontario. It may have been then, and it may have been in second-year university. I think it's not uncommon when when kids are reared in a Christian home to absorb an awful lot from their parents, and looking back, they can't quite be sure when they came to a personal faith on their own, and when there was sort of what the new hermeneutics people would call a distanciation, a self-distancing from the whole thing, and then coming to a personal faith only a little later. And so I don't really know. I've got a mental checklist of things to ask God one day, and one of them is, when did you save me? And my guess is he'll say something like, before the foundation of the earth, my son.
One of the many books you've written is The God Who Is There, and we're going to be promoting it at this conference. Can you tell us about why you wrote it and how you came about to be writing that book?
Well, I've been speaking on university campuses around the world now for about 35 years, introducing people to Christ and so on. And I was reared in French and English in Canada. So initially, all my speaking was done in that kind of environment. And in those sorts of circles, until fairly recently, 20 or 25 years ago, then even if I were dealing with an atheist, he or she was a Christian atheist. That is, the God in which they disbelieved was still the Christian God. So that's another way of saying all the categories are my turf, do you see? But that's all changed. Today, whether in America or in Britain, or for that matter in Hong Kong or Kuala Lumpur, increasingly you find young people who have virtually no understanding of what the Bible says. So the God in which they believe or disbelieve, all the pictures regarding him in their mind, all that they think about him or refuse to think about him, come from who knows what source. So for those who come from a more sort of Christianized background, nevertheless today the biblical illiteracy is so profound that today a lot of people don't know the Bible has 2 testaments, for example. If you don't understand what I just said, you're one of them. And they've never heard of Abraham, or if they've heard of Moses, they're thinking either of the recent cartoon character, or they're thinking of a massive film that was produced about 30 years ago. But they're images of that sort. There's no idea of how the Bible is put together. And God, if he, she, or it exists, is more or less made over in the image that I've absorbed from the culture around me. So within that framework, it seemed to me that one of the most important things is to give people a presentation of the God who really is there, according to the sweep of the whole Bible, while presupposing that the people who are reading the book don't have much background. So The God Who Is There is a book that introduces people at a pretty good level. It assumes you have a university level reading knowledge, but who, apart from that, don't know anything about the Bible. They don't know the difference between chapters and verses. Somebody's got to explain the big numbers and the little numbers. So it starts a long way back. It starts without assuming too much. But it's an attempt in 14 chapters to get through the whole Bible at some level or another, so that people can see how the Bible works, how it hangs together, and how God discloses himself in God's most holy word. So the impetus for writing the book came out of the fact that I speak to university students constantly and others, and discovering that the biblical ignorance was increasing, and that it was worth doing a survey of the whole, but starting farther back, but still making it at a good level. So that's really what it attempts to do. It's designed for use in small groups and personal reading and so on. There's a leader's guide that goes with it to give you Q&A and that sort of thing, in order to begin to come to grips with the Bible in the Bible's own terms, and thus to come to know the God who is there. That's the idea behind it.
And that's gone into a video series as well. Can you tell us about that?
With what I'm doing here? Well, they've only given me 3 nights. What can I say? There are 14 chapters. So I've adapted, in fact, 3 of the chapters. Instead of trying to give a survey of 14 in 3, I'm giving you an expansion of 3 in 3. But they're only representative of the series as a whole. So this is a kind of an attempt to deal with certain passages that I use in the book as sort of deep wells that get shafted down into the Bible to see how the Bible works as a whole. This is picked an arbitrary 3 of the 14.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing from you later.